based on the true legend of Julia Brown and the 1915 hurricane in Frenier, Louisiana. The Mourner's Song. In the suffocating heat of late summer 1915, Frenier, Louisiana, sweltered beneath a sun that never seemed to move. The moss-draped cypress trees that lined the bayou stood like sentinels, their long, crooked arms brushing the surface of the dark waters below. Even the insects buzzed slower, thick with the weight of the coming storm. Among the fading wood-frame homes of Frenier, one stood slightly apart, smaller than the rest, weathered grey, half swallowed by vines and surrounded by wilting marigolds. It was the home of Julia Brown, midwife, healer, and Voodoo Priestess. To some, she was a guardian, delivering babies with whispered prayers and poultices of swamp root. To others, she was a curse incarnate, her songs drifting over the waters like an omen. She had taken to singing alone on her porch each evening, rocking gently in her chair, her voice barely above a whisper. One day I'm gonna die and take the whole town with me. At first it was eerie. Then it became terrifying. The outsider. Over a century later, in 2025, history student Grace Landry returned to her hometown of La Place, Louisiana. She'd grown up with stories of Julia Brown. Her grandmother used to hush her with them. Now, pursuing her graduate thesis on Louisiana folklore, she was eager to explore the truth behind the legend. Grace was joined by her advisor, Professor Marcus Ellison, a skeptical New England academic who believed every myth was just a mask worn by history. They stayed in a crumbling guest house near Frenier, just off the old railroad tracks, long overtaken by vines. Grace found old newspaper clippings and even an obscure diary belonging to the town's last mayor, dated September 28, 1915. The air is thick with dread. Julia sings again tonight. Even the animals do not stir. We have ignored her long enough. But tomorrow is her funeral. Perhaps silence will come with her grave. The next day, the hurricane came. Grave talk. Grace and Professor Ellison visited Julia Brown's grave at Manchac Swamp. The headstone was half submerged in water, its inscription nearly faded. But Grace noticed something odd, an iron stake driven through the top of the stone, entwined with red string and bones. She wasn't buried, she was sealed, Grace murmured. Professor Ellison laughed. Superstition. Every culture needs its scapegoat. The hurricane was a coincidence. There's no such thing as curses. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. Her dreams were thick with choking water, screams, and a soft, creaking voice singing under the floorboards. One day I'm gonna die and take the whole town with me. She awoke to find water seeping from the floorboards. It hadn't rained. The recordings. Grace found old wax cylinder recordings in a museum archive in New Orleans, labeled Frenier 1915 Songs of Mourning. She brought the first one back to the guest house. They played it on a modern transfer system. Static buzzed, then a voice. Not mechanical, but soft, human, and too clear. One day I'm gonna die and take the whole town with me. Then silence. Then a second voice, deeper. Not Julia, but I will come for those who dig too deep. Professor Ellison froze. That wasn't part of the original. He rewound it. The second voice was gone. He didn't sleep that night. They chartered a small boat out to the remnants of Frenier, what was left of it under Manchac Swamp. Grace had heard rumors of buildings buried under the muck, swallowed by time. They reached an old foundation, waterlogged and half-eaten by roots. But beneath it, under tangled vines, they found steps leading downward under the swamp. "I think it was a cellar," Grace whispered. Inside, they found shelves of old jars, preserved herbs, bones, coins, dried hearts. At the center, a wooden altar with Julia's name carved into it. Then they heard it, footsteps above sloshing through water, slow, wet, then singing. They fled, but something followed, the twist of the knife. Back at the guest house, Grace scoured Julia's records and an old voodoo grimoire she had found in the cellar. Julia had been protecting the town, not cursing it. She had learned that a spirit had been unearthed during railway construction. Something older than her faith, something ancient and cruel. She had tried to warn the townsfolk. They mocked her. So she made a pact to die in their place and bind the spirit with her life. "One day I'm gonna die and take the whole town with me." She wasn't threatening. She was sacrificing. The hurricane wasn't summoned by Julia. It was summoned by what she was holding back. And now Julia's grave had been disturbed, and the stake was gone. Grace turned to Professor Ellison to show him the grimoire. He wasn't there. The door was open. The night was silent. Except, far off in the cypress swamp, a rocking chair creaked, and a voice, low, hollow, and not Julia's, sang something new. "The witch is gone. Now comes the feast." Grace ran to the window. Out in the bayou, faint outlines were emerging. Shapes in soaked, tattered clothing, their faces swollen and pale, dragging themselves up from beneath the cypress roots and silt-covered graves. The townspeople. But they were wrong, twisted. Their mouths hung slack, whispering Julia's name like a prayer and a curse. Their eyes, black as pitch, bled water. They had been taken with the storm in 1915, not by wind, not by waves, but by the thing she had bound with her life. And now, without her, they had been set loose, not to live again, but to feed. The last thing Grace saw before the lights went out was Professor Ellison's silhouette outside the cabin. Arms outstretched, eyes empty, singing, but not in his voice.